What happens when a calm morning talk show suddenly turns into a moment that nobody in the studio, and millions watching at home, will ever forget? The cameras are rolling. The lights of the studio glow like a small sun above the famous round table. The audience at the View is buzzing with the familiar anticipation of another lively episode. The hosts are laughing, chatting, doing what they always do. It feels routine, comfortable. But in just a few minutes, that routine will shatter. Because sitting backstage, preparing to walk onto the stage, is Charlize Theron, Academy Award winner, fearless performer, and someone who never backs down from a conversation. And across the table waiting for her is Whoopi Goldberg, the legendary moderator known for her sharp wit, blunt honesty, and decades of experience navigating heated debates on live television. What happens when two powerful personalities collide under the bright lights of live TV? Before we dive into the moment that had the entire studio holding its breath, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit the like button, and drop a comment below. Because stories like this reveal the moments you never see coming. Now let's step into the studio. The theme music fades out. Applause erupts from the audience. Whoopi leans forward at the table, adjusting her glasses slightly as she looks into the camera. "All right, everybody," she says in her familiar calm voice. "Our next guest is an Academy Award winner, an action star, and someone who never seems to take the easy path in Hollywood. Please welcome Charlize Theron." The audience explodes with cheers. From behind the curtain, Charlize steps out. She moves with that effortless confidence that has defined her career, from the fierce intensity of Mad Max, Fury Road to the emotional power of Monster, the role that won her an Oscar. She smiles, waving to the audience. But if you look closely, there's something different about her expression tonight. Focused, measured, almost guarded. Charlize takes her seat at the table beside the hosts. Whoopi greets her with a friendly nod. "Good to see you," Whoopi says. "Good to see you too," Charlize replies warmly. At first, everything unfolds exactly the way daytime television usually does. The conversation begins with the easy topics. Her latest film, the long hours on set, the brutal stunt training she went through. Joy ripples through the audience as Charlize jokingly describes one particular stunt gone wrong. "I thought I broke 3 ribs," she laughs. "Turned out it was just 1. The hosts laugh along. Joy Behar shakes her head dramatically. "See, this is why I sit behind a table for a living." Laughter fills the room again. For a moment, everything feels light, playful. But then the conversation begins drifting towards something deeper. Whoopi folds her hands on the table. Her tone shifts just slightly. "You've always been very outspoken about issues in Hollywood," she says carefully. "About pay gaps, representation, things like that." Charlize nods. "Yeah, and you've also said in interviews that you think some people in the industry don't want those conversations happening." The audience quiets a little. Charlize leans back slightly in her chair. Her voice remains calm. "That's true." Whoopi studies her for a moment. "Do you feel like things are changing?" There's a pause. Not a long one, but long enough for the tension to become noticeable. Charlize glances toward the audience briefly before answering. "Some things are changing," she says slowly. "But a lot of things are still protected." Whoopi raises an eyebrow. "Protected?" Charlize nods. "Yeah." Joy leans forward. "What do you mean by protected?" Charlize's eyes move back to Whoopi. And suddenly, the air in the room feels heavier. "Sometimes," Charlize says carefully, "people with power decide what conversations are allowed, and which ones get shut down." The audience shifts in their seats. Whoopi tilts her head. "You think that happens here?" she asks. The question lands on the table like a stone. Charlize doesn't answer immediately. She studies Whoopi. And for a moment, the studio feels completely silent. "I think it happens everywhere," Charlize says finally. The audience murmurs quietly. Whoopi gives a small nod, but her expression tightens just slightly. "You know," she says, leaning forward a little, "this show has always been about letting people speak their minds." Charlize smiles faintly. "I know," but Whoopi continues, "there's also a difference between speaking your mind and accusing people of shutting others down." The temperature in the room drops. The other hosts glance between them. Charlize folds her hands in her lap. "I wasn't accusing anyone here," she says calmly. "But you were implying it," Whoopi replies. The audience gasps softly. Joy glances toward the crowd as if sensing the shift. "Okay," she says nervously. "We're getting spicy early today." A few people laugh, but the tension remains. Charlize looks directly at Whoopi now. "I'm talking about the industry," she says. Not this table. Whoopi doesn't look convinced. Well, she says slowly, when you sit at this table and say things like that, people might assume you're talking about the people sitting here. Another pause. Charlize exhales quietly. That's not what I meant. But the energy has changed. You can feel it in the room. The audience senses it. The hosts sense it. Even the camera operators seem to slow their movements. Whoopi leans back in her chair. All right, she says. Let's talk about something else for a second. Joy jumps in quickly. Yes, please. But Charlize speaks again. And what she says next is the moment the conversation truly begins to unravel. Actually, Charlize says softly, I think this is exactly the conversation we should be having. The audience goes silent. Whoopi turns back toward her. Oh, Charlize nods. Because the problem isn't just Hollywood, she says. It's how people react when someone points out uncomfortable truths. A ripple moves through the audience. Whoopi's expression hardens just slightly. And what uncomfortable truth are you pointing out right now? She asks. Charlize meets her gaze. That sometimes powerful voices don't like being challenged. The words hang in the air. For a moment, nobody moves. Not the hosts. Not the audience. Not even the cameras. And that's when Whoopi slowly folds her arms. Well, she says calmly, you came to the right table for a challenge. A murmur sweeps through the crowd. Charlize nods slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. And suddenly, the interview everyone expected to be friendly is becoming something else entirely. Something raw. Something unpredictable. Something that no one watching at home is ready for. Because the next question Whoopi asks Charlize Theron will push the conversation into territory that will leave the entire studio stunned. And the clash that follows will become one of the most talked about moments ever to unfold on The View. The studio lights feel hotter now. Not because anything in the room has physically changed, but because everyone can feel it. That invisible tension that creeps into a room when two strong personalities stop circling each other and finally step into the center of the ring. The cameras continue to roll on The View, but the atmosphere has shifted from daytime conversation to something far more unpredictable. The audience senses it first. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Some people lean forward in their seats. Others glance nervously at the stage managers standing near the curtains, who are suddenly watching the table much more carefully. At the center of it all sit Charlize Theron and Whoopi Goldberg, facing each other across the table. Two icons. Two powerful voices. And now, two very different perspectives. Whoopi studies Charlize for a moment, her fingers lightly tapping against the table. You know, Whoopi says slowly, people come to this show because they want real conversations. They want honesty. Charlize nods. Exactly. But honesty, Whoopi continues, also means being clear about what you're saying. The audience is completely silent now. Charlize sits upright, calm but focused. I am being clear. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. Then let's be clear, she says. Joy Behar shifts slightly in her seat, sensing the moment building again. Oh, she mutters under her breath, drawing a small nervous laugh from the crowd. Whoopi doesn't look away from Charlize. You said powerful voices don't like to be challenged, she says. Charlize nods. I did. Are you saying that people in this industry silence those challenges? Yes. The answer comes without hesitation. A murmur spreads through the audience. Whoopi tilts her head slightly. But you're here, aren't you? She says, speaking freely. Charlize smiles faintly. Yes. So how exactly are you being silenced? There's a subtle edge in Whoopi's voice now. Not anger, but challenge. Charlize pauses before answering, because she knows what she's about to say won't make the conversation easier. Just because someone gets a microphone, she says slowly, doesn't mean the system welcomes what they say. The room grows still again. Joy glances at the other hosts. Even the audience can feel the tension tightening like a wire. Whoopi leans forward. All right, she says. Explain that. Charlize looks down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she looks back up. You know what happens sometimes when someone speaks out in Hollywood, she says. People say they support you. Publicly. But privately things change. Opportunities disappear. Phones stop ringing. A quiet murmur spreads across the audience. Whoopi nods slowly. That's not new, she says. That's how power works everywhere. Charlize lifts an eyebrow slightly. Exactly. But, Whoopi continues, you've had one of the most successful careers in the business. She gestures toward Charlize. You won an Oscar for Monster. You headline Mad Max, Fury Road, one of the biggest action films of the decade. You're producing projects. You're starring in them. Does that look like someone being shut down? The audience claps lightly. Charlize doesn't react immediately. Instead, she tilts her head slightly, considering the question. You're right, she says calmly. I've been lucky. Then she adds something that shifts the entire conversation again. But I'm not just talking about me. Now the audience is leaning forward again. Charlize's voice becomes quieter, but more intense. I'm talking about the actresses who don't get invited to shows like this. The words hang in the air. Whoopi folds her arms again. And what exactly are they being excluded for? Charlize meets her gaze. For telling the truth. A ripple of reactions spreads across the studio. Joy raises her hands slightly. Okay, we're definitely in the deep end now, she says. The audience laughs nervously. But Whoopi doesn't smile. Truth about what? She asks. Charlize exhales slowly. About how power protects itself. Now the silence in the room feels almost heavy. Whoopi leans back in her chair again. Her expression is calm, but sharper now. You're talking about the industry like it's some secret club. Charlize gives a small shrug. Sometimes it is. Joy leans toward Whoopi. I mean, she's not wrong about Hollywood being weird. The audience chuckles, but the tension at the center of the table doesn't fade. Whoopi taps the table lightly with her fingers again. You know, she says slowly, I've been in this business for over 40 years. The audience applauds. And in those 40 years, she continues, I've seen people rise, fall, fight, succeed, fail. She gestures toward Charlize. And I've also seen people blame the system for things that were really about choices. A quiet, oh, spreads through the audience. Charlize doesn't flinch, but her eyes narrow just slightly. You think that's what this is? She asks. Whoopi shrugs. I'm saying sometimes people talk about the system like it's the villain in every story. And sometimes, Charlize replies calmly, it is. The audience reacts again. Joy leans back in her chair dramatically. I need popcorn, she whispers. A few people laugh, but everyone knows something serious is unfolding. Whoopi looks directly at Charlize now. And what exactly are you accusing the system of? Charlize answers immediately. Protecting the wrong people. The room goes quiet again. Even the audience members who had been whispering earlier stop. Because everyone knows what topic is hovering just beneath the surface now. Hollywood scandals. Powerful men. Silenced voices. Whoopi nods slowly. Those conversations have happened, she says. Many times. Yes, Charlize replies. And they should keep happening. Whoopi tilts her head slightly. So what's the problem? Charlize pauses. Then she says something that causes several hosts at the table to shift in their seats. The problem, she says quietly, is that sometimes the conversation stops when it gets too close to powerful people. The audience murmurs again. Whoopi studies her. Who exactly are you talking about? Charlize hesitates for the first time. Not out of fear, but because she knows what naming names could do. I'm talking about a culture, she says finally. But Whoopi presses further. Culture is a big word. She leans forward slightly. People want specifics. The tension grows thicker. Charlize looks around the table. Then back at Whoopi. You really want specifics? Whoopi nods calmly. If you're going to say it on national television, yes. A ripple of anticipation moves through the crowd. Charlize takes a slow breath. Then she speaks again. And what she says next sends a visible shock through the room. All right, she says. Let's talk about the moments when women speak up. And the first reaction from powerful voices is to question them. A few audience members clap. Others gasp. Because everyone realizes something. This isn't just a discussion anymore. This is becoming a confrontation. Whoopi's eyes narrow slightly. Careful, she says quietly. Charlize tilts her head. Why? Whoopi's voice remains calm, but firm. Because words matter. Charlize nods. That's exactly why I'm choosing them carefully. Joy glances toward the producers off camera. Even they look tense now. Because the interview is drifting into territory no daytime show can fully control. Whoopi folds her hands on the table. Then let me ask you something directly. Charlize nods. Go ahead. Whoopi leans forward slightly. Her voice lowers. Are you saying that people in this industry, people with influence, platforms, and voices, sometimes help protect the very culture they claim to challenge? The audience gasps softly. Charlize holds Whoopi's gaze. And for a moment, she doesn't answer. But when she finally does, Her response is the spark that will ignite the most explosive moment of the entire interview. Yes, Charlize says quietly. I think that happens. The room freezes. And suddenly, the tension between Charlize Theron and Whoopi Goldberg is no longer subtle. It's out in the open. And the next thing Whoopi says will make the audience gasp so loudly that the producers in the control room immediately start debating whether the cameras should keep rolling. For a moment, the studio feels like it's holding its breath. The bright stage lights glare down over the famous table of The View, but suddenly the cheerful daytime set feels less like a talk show and more like a pressure cooker. Every person in the audience senses it. Something has shifted, because when Charlize Theron calmly said yes, that powerful voices sometimes protect the very culture they claim to challenge. Everyone at the table understood what that meant, and so did Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she leans back slowly in her chair, her expression unreadable. For decades, she's handled heated discussions, political debates, cultural arguments, emotional testimonies. But this moment feels different, not because of the topic, but because of the implication hanging in the air. The audience shifts nervously. A few people whisper to each other. At the far edge of the set, a stage manager presses a finger to their headset, listening to the control room. But the cameras are still rolling, and the conversation is far from over. Whoopi finally exhales and leans forward again. All right, she says calmly. Her voice carries that familiar steadiness that viewers recognize instantly. But if you're going to say something like that on this show, you should probably be very clear about what you mean. Charlize doesn't look away. I am. Joy Behar shifts slightly in her seat. Her usual humor has faded now. Even she looks cautious, because the moment is no longer playful. It's serious. Whoopi folds her hands together. You're talking about people with platforms, she says. People with influence. Charlize nods. Yes. And you're suggesting some of those people, Whoopi continues slowly, protect the system. Yes. The answer lands softly, but heavily. The audience murmurs again. Whoopi's eyes narrow slightly. And you're saying that here. Charlize gives a small shrug. I'm saying it everywhere. A ripple of reaction spreads across the crowd. Whoopi tilts her head. But when you say powerful voices, people might assume you're talking about the people sitting at this table. The tension spikes again. Charlize doesn't hesitate. If the shoe fits, she says quietly. The audience gasps. Joy's eyes widen. Okay, Joy blurts out quickly. That escalated. A few people in the crowd laugh nervously. But Whoopi doesn't. She studies Charlize carefully. You think we protect the system? Whoopi asks. Charlize takes a breath. I think sometimes the reaction to criticism proves the point. Whoopi leans back slightly. So now we're the example. Charlize shakes her head. I didn't say that. But you implied it, Whoopi replies. Charlize tilts her head. Did I? The back and forth is starting to feel like a chess match, and the audience can feel every move. Whoopi's tone sharpens just slightly. You came on this show, she says, and now you're suggesting the hosts help protect the culture you're criticizing. Charlize keeps her voice calm. I came on this show to talk about a problem that still exists. Whoopi taps the table lightly. And I'm asking if you're accusing the people sitting here. Charlize pauses. Then she answers. I'm asking everyone with a platform to look at how they react when someone challenges the system. The audience reacts again. Some clap. Others exchange glances. Because suddenly it feels like the conversation is no longer about Hollywood alone. It's about responsibility. Whoopi exhales slowly. You know, she says, I've spent a lot of years calling out problems in this industry. The audience applauds loudly. And I've taken heat for it, she continues. Charlize nods respectfully. I know. So don't sit here and act like I'm protecting the system, Whoopi says firmly. The room goes quiet again. Charlize doesn't look angry, but her expression is serious. I'm not attacking you, she says. Then what are you doing? Whoopi asks. Charlize leans forward slightly now. For the first time in the conversation, she looks visibly passionate. I'm saying the conversation can't stop just because it gets uncomfortable. The audience erupts into applause. Whoopi lets the applause fade before speaking again. No one here is stopping the conversation, she says. Charlize looks around the table, then back at Whoopi. But look at what just happened. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. What happened? Charlize gestures lightly toward the hosts. The moment I talked about powerful voices protecting the system, the focus shifted to defending yourselves. The audience murmurs again. Joy rubs her forehead. Oh boy. Whoopi leans forward. That's because you brought it to this table. Charlize nods slowly. And maybe that's where the conversation needs to happen. The tension tightens again. Even the audience members near the stage look frozen in place. Whoopi's expression hardens slightly. You're making a lot of assumptions. Charlize answers quietly. I'm pointing out patterns. The air between them feels electric now. Joy finally leans forward, trying to lighten the moment. Okay, can we all agree Hollywood is messy and move on? She says with a nervous smile. A few laughs ripple through the audience. But neither Charlize nor Whoopi laughs. Whoopi turns back to Charlize. Let me ask you something. Charlize nods. Go ahead. Whoopi's voice drops slightly. Do you think the people watching this show right now see us as part of the problem? The audience leans forward. Charlize pauses. She knows whatever she says next will land hard. I think people are tired of watching powerful institutions defend themselves instead of listening. The audience erupts into mixed reactions. Some clap loudly. Others gasp. A few shake their heads. The divide in the room is suddenly visible. Whoopi nods slowly. So now we're an institution. Charlize gives a small smile. This show has a lot of influence. Whoopi chuckles softly. But influence isn't the same thing as control. Charlize replies calmly. No, but it does come with responsibility. The words land quietly, but their weight fills the studio. For several seconds, nobody speaks. Even the hosts who usually jump into debates sit silently. Then suddenly, from the back of the audience, someone shouts. Let her talk. Another voice responds. She is talking. The crowd begins murmuring louder. The tension that started at the table is spreading into the audience itself. Stage managers exchange worried looks. This is no longer just a debate. It's turning into a moment. A live television moment. Whoopi glances briefly toward the audience, then back to Charlize. Well, she says slowly, you definitely started a conversation today. Charlize nods. That was the idea. Whoopi studies her for another long moment. Then she says something that makes the entire room gasp. You know what the real problem is with conversations like this? Charlize raises an eyebrow. What? Whoopi leans forward, her voice calm but pointed. People start them, and then walk away before dealing with the consequences. The audience reacts loudly. Charlize's eyes narrow slightly. You think I walk away? Whoopi shrugs. You're an A-list movie star. She gestures toward Charlize. You get to leave this studio and go back to making blockbusters like Mad Max, Fury Road, and whatever comes next. The crowd murmurs again. Charlize leans forward now too, her voice steady. But the people without power don't get to walk away. That line hits the audience like thunder. Applause bursts out across the studio. Whoopi watches her carefully. And for the first time since the conversation began, she doesn't respond immediately, because something about that answer clearly struck a nerve. But what happens next will shock everyone watching. Because in just a few seconds, Whoopi Goldberg will say something that stops the entire conversation cold and sends the studio into complete silence. For a few seconds, the studio feels frozen in time. The applause that followed Charlize Theron's last words slowly fades, echoing against the bright studio walls of the view. No one at the table moves. The audience, which just moments ago had erupted into claps and murmurs, is now completely silent again. And at the center of that silence sits Whoopi Goldberg, staring at Charlize with an expression that is difficult to read. Not angry, not amused, something deeper, something more serious. Whoopi leans back in her chair slowly, letting the quiet stretch longer than anyone expected. The other hosts glance between them. Joy Behar presses her lips together, clearly debating whether to jump in or stay quiet. Even the crew members at the edge of the stage look tense, because everyone in the room knows something important is about to be said. Whoopi finally exhales. Then she leans forward again. You know what the real danger is, she says calmly. Charlize watches her carefully. What? Whoopi's voice is steady. When people start believing that anyone who disagrees with them must be part of the problem. The audience shifts. Charlize tilts her head slightly. I didn't say that. Whoopi raises a finger gently. But it's the direction conversations like this can go. The room grows still again. Whoopi folds her hands together on the table. Let me be clear about something, she says. I've spent decades calling out injustice in this industry. The audience applauds again. And I've also spent decades listening to people who don't agree with me. Charlize nods slowly. That's important. Whoopi's eyes remain fixed on her. But listening also means recognizing that sometimes people are on the same side, even if they talk about the problem differently. The tension softens slightly. Just slightly. Charlize takes a breath. I agree with that. Whoopi studies her. Do you? Charlize nods. Yes. Then she adds quietly. But agreement doesn't mean silence. The audience murmurs again. Whoopi chuckles softly. No one here is asking for silence. Charlize leans back slightly in her chair now. For the first time since the debate started, her posture relaxes a little. Then maybe this is exactly the conversation we should be having, she says. Whoopi nods slowly. Maybe it is. The moment lingers. The sharp edge of confrontation begins to soften into something else. Reflection. Joy Behar finally leans forward again. Well, she says dramatically, that was the most intense Tuesday morning coffee conversation I've ever had. The audience bursts into laughter. Even Whoopi smiles slightly. Charlize lets out a small laugh too. The tension finally breaks. But the weight of the conversation still hangs in the air. Because everyone in that room knows something unusual just happened. A daytime talk show discussion turned into a real, raw exchange between two powerful voices. And the audience felt every second of it. Whoopi glances toward the camera. Well, folks, she says, this is what happens when people come to this table ready to talk. The audience applauds loudly. Charlize nods respectfully. And I appreciate being able to, she says. Whoopi gives a small nod back. Even when we disagree. Charlize smiles. Especially then. The applause grows louder again. But behind the scenes, something else is happening. In the control room above the studio floor, producers are already whispering to each other. Phones are lighting up. Assistants are scrolling through social media feeds. Because the moment that just happened on The View isn't staying inside the studio. It's already exploding online. Within minutes of the segment ending, clips begin spreading across platforms. One clip shows Charlize saying, "Powerful voices don't like being challenged." Another shows Whoopi replying, "Careful. Words matter." A third clip captures the moment Charlize said, "If the shoe fits." And suddenly the internet is on fire. Some viewers praise Charlize. They call her brave. They say she spoke truth about power and accountability in Hollywood. Others defend Whoopi. They argue that she stood her ground and pushed back against broad accusations. Debate spreads across comment sections and trending hashtags. Entertainment reporters begin posting headlines. Did Charlize Theron call out The View? Whoopi Goldberg fires back during tense interview. Daytime TV clash goes viral. Inside the studio, the show continues moving forward, but everyone knows the earlier moment will overshadow everything else. When the episode finally wraps, the audience slowly begins to leave their seats. Many are still talking about what they just witnessed. Did that really just happen live? One woman whispers. Another audience member shakes his head. That was wild. Backstage, the energy is different too. Crew members exchange looks. Some laugh nervously. Others replay the moment on their phones. Because in the world of television, moments like that don't happen often. Unscripted. Unpredictable. Real. And as Charlize walks backstage, a producer approaches her. That was intense, the producer says carefully. Charlize smiles faintly. Conversations usually are. Across the hallway, Whoopi is speaking quietly with one of the show's staff members. She looks calm again. Experienced. Like someone who has seen moments like this before. Because she has. But even she knows this one will be talked about for days. Maybe weeks. And by that evening, clips from the interview are everywhere. News channels replay the exchange. Entertainment blogs analyze every sentence. Body language experts appear on panels discussing the tension between Charlize and Whoopi. Some say it was a clash. Others say it was a necessary conversation. But everyone agrees on one thing. People couldn't stop watching. Because moments like that remind audiences why live television still matters. You never know what might happen. You never know when a conversation might take an unexpected turn. And sometimes, those turns lead to moments that people will replay again and again. But now we want to hear from you. What did you think about this intense exchange between Charlize Theron and Whoopi Goldberg? Do you think Charlize made an important point? Or do you think Whoopi was right to challenge her? Drop your opinion in the comments below, because your voice is part of the conversation too. And if you enjoy deep, dramatic stories from the world of celebrities, interviews, and unforgettable TV moments, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and turn on notifications. because the next explosive story might be even more shocking than this one.